Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
So, Jackie Fletcher and Louise Reynolds. Nice surname, by the way.
I know.
Yeah,
we're on the R team.
Together, you guys are fabulously keto. And I actually did an interview with you on your podcast recently, and we're kind of doing a reciprocal thing here. But looking at your stories, you have some fascinating things to talk about. So maybe we can start with Louise. You know, in your story, I don't want to give it away or anything, but the way that you came to it, I find what I'm really battling with in this community is to try and move away from or prevent so much of the judgment of different, you know, there's so much judgment in this community about the way people do things, and everything's personal, right? And with your story, there is often judgment, and I'm really glad that we get to address this now so that we can put some things to rest, I hope. So please tell us your story about how you got to be involved in this keto movement.
Well, yeah, and I suppose we'll just name the elephant in the room, and that is obviously weight loss surgery.
Right.
And yes, my name is Louise, and I've had weight loss surgery. But that's, as you said, it's only part of my story. And, you know, I'm a college professor. So there I was standing up in front of large, you know, undergraduate freshman courses at nearly 300 pounds. And just to let you know, like I was actually teaching these large Common Core freshman classes of health professionals. And here I was attesting to being, you know, this is healthcare, this is healthcare systems. And I was a morbidly obese woman. Now, as you would imagine, you know, being a college professor, I'm not, you know, I am a little bit clever, and I didn't get there just, you know, well, certainly not exercising and eating less and moving more, but in actual fact I was. But, you know, I had done everything. I'd done Jenny Craig, I've done Weight Watchers, I had my physical trainer 3 times a week. You know, I had eaten less and moved more, and clearly it wasn't working for me. So something had to give. It was one of my students who had weight loss surgery, and she just sort of looked amazing, you know, this transformation. So you're probably wondering, well, if I was so clever, how did I get to 300 pounds? Well, you know, and that was really because I was, as Dr. Phil, you know, one of your esteemed American alumni there, you know, was telling me that I was having a party in my mouth. You know, I was using food to soothe my emotions. So I'd just come out of a, you know, very unhappy marriage. I was single parenting a child with special needs. I was doing my doctoral dissertation. You know, I was just one big ball of stress. And that was really where, you know, me, comfort eating and emotional eating was obviously, you know, I was soothing my emotions through food. So I made the decision in 2012 to have weight loss surgery, and if you can imagine, I was interviewing the surgeons with all the literature. I'd highlighted, I had sticky notes on it. You know, I'd been to about 3 different surgeons, and I really was quite rigorous in this decision. I didn't take this decision lightly. Already in 2012, I'd had 3 years of therapy. To obviously, you know, recognize that my emotions had played really quite a significant contribution to my weight. So by that stage, I was probably, you know, at the end of my tether. And for whatever reason, fortuitously, I hadn't really come across Atkins or low-carb keto in 2012. So, you know, it wasn't for the want of trying. And I took that decision to do it, and I did it being very mindful that it was a tool. It was going to be part of a tool for this next chapter. And I relative success, for a number of, by 2015, I had lost about 90 pounds. I did pretty well. I'd had another 2 years of therapy. And just to sort of say, I had therapy with a particular psychologist that specialized in eating disorders. Not to say that he diagnosed me with a eating disorder, but I certainly had disorderly eating. So, in a bingey sort of way. So I would eat lots of food because I was particularly hungry. It was carb-centric. In 2015, I had a motorcycle accident and I sustained quite significant injuries, broken ribs, collapsed lungs, 3 vertebrae, burst, fractured, and ended up with a 5-hour sort of spinal surgery, induced coma. It was pretty bad. But it wasn't until my mum, sort of unbeknownst to me, had been low-carb keto. She found Tim Noakes and the Real Meal Revolution, and she had been doing keto for low-carb keto for about 6 months. And then after my surgery, I was really, struggling with that chronic pain condition. So I was trying to manage, obviously my rehab. And she said, oh, well, maybe you need to manage your inflammation, wink, wink, with food. And I'm going, what are you talking about? So then she introduced me to What's the Fat with Grant Schofield and Carolyn Zinn, Real Meal Revolution. And so not only was I really coupling the chronic pain condition, but the side effect of losing another 40 pounds. So in total, I'd lost 130 pounds. And really for me, the sustainability and still using the weight loss surgery restriction of my vertical sleeve gastrectomy it just makes sense. It's a tool. The weight loss surgery was a tool to get me to what is now 130 pound weight loss, which I've sustained for 8 years, or coming up 9 years now. So it's probably, I know that I'm one of the lucky ones, because for so many people with weight loss surgery, they haven't front-ended that with 3 years of therapy. They haven't back-ended that with another 2 years of therapy to really get what is, an emotional eating issue under control. But it was something that got me over the line, but I've been able to sustain with, low carb keto.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I definitely will come back to look into that a bit deeper. But before we do that, Jackie, you've also got a pretty amazing story. Maybe you can tell everybody what your situation was and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I've always been overweight, and I always say I was destined to be fat because my granddad was so big. His nickname was Cannon, from the 70s detective Cannon.
Right, yeah.
And so it was quite likely that I was going to inherit those genes of being overweight. So by the time I was in my early teens, now looking back, of course I wasn't fat or overweight, but compared to my peers, I was. And so I started on Weight Watchers, I did Cambridge diet, I did every diet that came along, because all my friends were really thin and I wanted to be like them, but I wasn't. And I could only sustain it for about 3 weeks, and then my motivation just disappeared and I would go back to what I was doing. Maybe I'll just have a treat at the weekend, but of course you never get back to it. And that went on. And for a number of years in my middle teens, if I touched my stomach, it was very hard. And I would say to my mum, this doesn't feel right. And she would say, go to the doctor. And of course I didn't. Who wants to go to the doctor when you're 15? But by the time I was 17, I was in agony every month almost. And often came home from school, laying on the couch in a lot of pain. After lots of doctors and lots of tests, they eventually said that I needed an operation. And just before my 18th birthday, I was admitted to hospital. I had no idea what was going on at this point. I knew I was going into hospital. I knew I was going to have an operation, but they hadn't told me what was going on. And what they did was they took out a tumor, which was the size of a football, so something like that. Afterwards, we found out, I didn't find out until I was in my 30s, but I found out that it was benign, which was lucky. So looking back now, I sort of think, well, maybe this is all carbohydrate, insulin resistance related, because we know about PCOS. I don't think there was very much knowledge, especially amongst lay people. There wasn't very much knowledge about it in those days, because that's a long time ago. So from there, I went on to, after that, I put on a lot of weight. I went up to 90 kilos when I was 19. And I now know that was due to all the hormones being messed up, because they removed, as well as the tumor, they removed 1.5 ovaries and my appendix. So a lot of my insides were taken away. So then I suffered on and off with ulcers, migraines. By the time I was 27, I had migraines. They would last for 3 or 4 days. And by the time I was in my mid-30s, they would, I would get around 10 to 12 migraines a month. It almost felt like every other day I was having a migraine, and I was taking Imigran, which is sumitrapan, and that worked really well. But I think it put me on a cycle of getting more headaches in a way. So that went on for a long, long time. When I had my boys, not surprisingly, I had to have through IVF, and I have twin boys who are now 18. So I was 40 at the time. I'll let you all work out how old I am. And 3 weeks after having a cesarean, I was in agony, and I didn't know what it was. I went to the doctors. They said, you have gallstones and you're having a gallbladder attack. We need to operate to take out your gallbladder. Having just had a cesarean 3 weeks before, I said, thank you very much. I will see what I can do. And so over the last 18 years, I still have my gallbladder. I sometimes still have attacks, but I manage it better now. I know what causes it. I know what to do about it when it comes on. So over time, I just gave up dieting. What is the point? I'm no good. I can't do this. I have no willpower. I have no motivation. I'm not going to diet anymore. There's no point. By 2017, I weighed 231 pounds, and I didn't care anymore. I really didn't care. And I knew that wheat was addictive, because I'd read Wheat Belly a few years before. And at that time, when I read Wheat Belly, I did give up wheat for about 9 months, but went back to it. So I knew that wheat was addictive, but I just could not stop. Every day I would go, I'd drive 6 miles to get a fresh loaf of bread, Monday to Friday, fresh bread every day, 6 miles on backward, 3 miles there, 3 miles back, just to get bread. And I would eat 2 or 3 slices every day. Lunch was always a sandwich, and then potatoes with my dinner in the evening. And here in the UK, we have tea time, and tea time comes with biscuits. And those 2 biscuits with my tea were creeping up to 3 or 4 biscuits. And with that, I also had a lot of stress at the time. My weight crept up. So I had no thought of going on diet, because, as I said, diets don't work. I came across a podcast. I was listening to a podcast, and they mentioned a book called Mastering Your Habits, what's it called? Better Than Before, Mastering Your Habits of Everyday Lives. So there's an urge to want to change, to be better, to do things better, to be more consistent. But I wasn't doing it. But I brought the book, and in it she mentioned Gary Taubes' Why We Get Fat. And so the next month I listened to that, and that just brought home everything to me, that it's about what you're eating, It's not about dieting. You can't exercise, you can't outrun a bad diet, as they say. You just have to cut out the things that make you fat. Now, when I think back to it, back in my teens, if we wanted to lose weight, when I first started losing weight, what did we do? We cut out the potatoes. We didn't eat pasta in those days. We cut out the biscuits, the cakes, and all those things. So that just made absolute sense. The fact that fat is tasty, I've always loved fat. And I used to eat it. I just felt guilty about eating it. So it all just fell into place, and I didn't even investigate any further. I didn't even follow any particular plan. I just cut out wheat, potatoes, cakes, biscuits, sweets, breads, all those sorts of things. I was still eating high carb vegetables. For me, I loved peas and corn, but it worked. I was still eating my chocolate in the evening, but I don't eat lots of chocolate. I just have a square or two and then I'm happy. So that's what brought me to low carb. After about 6 months, I then found Keto Clarity by Jimmy Moore. And then I started to investigate more and then look into it and start to change. Even from where I started to change what I was eating. And that's brought me down the line to where we are now.
So, Louise, to go back to the bariatric surgery, one of my best friends, favorite guys in this community is Dr. Robert Sivers. Mm-hmm. And he is a bariatric surgeon. And, you know, I was talking earlier about judgment and stuff, and there's so many people on social media that go on about bariatric surgery and why don't you just eat properly and you won't need the surgery. But that's just not the case for so many people. But the thing with Rob is that he does what you seem to find it on your own, but with his patients, he puts them on a program of adopting this lifestyle, this diet ahead of time. And he won't operate on them unless they basically commit to continuing this through and after the surgery, because he said, you know, it's a forced fasting, and it's a forced diet, and it's very effective for the first up to 2 years. But after that, the weight comes back with interest if the people are not eating right, you know, because that's why you got that big, was because of the way you're eating. If you don't change that, you know, you're going to end up back at square one. And one of the biggest things he does is treat people as food addicts. And this whole concept of food addiction is becoming more and more prevalent. And if you hear any of his talks, he's always talking about emotional management strategies. And that's what he spends most of his time doing, is coaching his patients on dealing with that addiction and dealing with those emotional situations, so that you don't turn to crap food to soothe that.
Absolutely, like 110%. And those absolute pieces of the puzzle, you know, in terms of where I am now, like 8-9 years down the track, and you hit the nail on the head with the food addiction. And that sort of cycle that sort of was layered upon with the emotions and the emotional sort of, I had some really quite significant stressors in my life. I was a doctoral student, I was single parenting a child with special needs, you know, I was trying to manage an academic career, you know, there was so much stuff, you know, from my marriage that was, you know, still playing out with the family court stuff. You know, this was just a recipe for disaster. No wonder I was eating my, you know, as Dr. Phil said, you know, I was having this party in my mouth because I was sad and anxious, depressed, you know, whatever it was. And thank goodness, you know, I front-ended the decision to have the surgery with those 3 years of, you know, therapy. And then 2 years after that. But only later did I realize, you know, coming across all that food addiction literature, you know, Vera Tarman, with the food junkies, and realizing obviously the biochemical stuff that was going in my brain with the dopamine cycles, with the sugars from the carbs, that was all playing out. But whether it's chicken and the egg, the emotions or the food, but together for me and my genetics, just was this propensity to be morbidly obese, and that sort of thing. But just picking up on that point about, Rob Cyrus and the success of, the emotional management, for sure, so many people, with the stigma, and it's really about trying to, that's my little platform, to destigmatize the decision to have a tool. It's just a tool. It's not going to be the be all and end all. You have to still do the work if you've had weight loss surgery. You need to be to assure that you're going to have the success. There's no point with me, my tummy the size of a banana, sucking down, Dairy Queen blizzards. That's not nutrient dense, but fatty protein, particularly for a woman of my age, needs to have that to maintain my lean body mass. That makes sense. I can't fill up on bread. It's not nutrient dense. The fatty proteins is really where I need to manage and to ensure and assure that my tool is fit for purpose for the rest of my life.
Right. So, the thing about addiction is that not everybody struggles with it. I didn't. I was able to just give everything up. I didn't think I could, but it just like, once I was able to eat fatty foods again, which tasted so good, it was like, what do I want pasta and bread and stuff for? But some people just can't do it, and I had to come around to acknowledging that and understanding that and being tolerant and understanding of those people, and people like me, I feel are more in the minority than everybody else. I think most people are on, it's like a scale, but somewhere on that scale, most people fit in terms of some kind of food addiction. And just going back to Rob, he's one of the guys that I know of that suffers the most from this carb addiction craving thing. Even, like every day, like an alcoholic, he battles with it. And he literally, from his surgery, he devises routes through the back roads and stuff to get home so that he doesn't drive past the fast food places and that, because the car just like turns in there. And he comes out with this massive smoothie full of M&Ms and stuff, which is like Smarties for you guys, right? And he just sucks it down. And the next minute he's off the wagon. And, to this day, he still battles with that. And so what that brings me back to is a comment that Jackie made about being able to moderate stuff. And I think I would be, we got rid of everything out of our kitchen because luckily Pam got on the bandwagon as well. So I don't know this for sure, but I'm fairly sure that I would be able to have stuff in the house if someone else in the house was eating it and not eat it. But I don't know that. But there are people that can do it. And I was fascinated to hear, Jackie, that you feel like you're one of those people, that you can have that stuff in the house, that some people in your family aren't on this low carb wagon. And so there is other food in the house, and yet you still manage to be successful. And that's intriguing to me. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So even before being low carb and keto, I could moderate chocolate. And people would say to me, how can you do that? And in the UK, we have these big bars of dairy milk or fruit and nut, and fruit and nut was my chocolate of choice. And I could have it in the cupboard or beside me on the couch, and I would just take one strip in the evening after my dinner, and that was it. And people would say to me, how can you do that? If I've got the chocolate bar, I need to eat it all. Sometimes I would throw away chocolate because it had been sitting there for so long and I hadn't eaten it. So I've always felt that I can moderate. And so when I do, my husband is not keto. He's not interested. He's type 2 diabetic, so he should be, but he isn't. and he doesn't want to give up his cigarettes, and he doesn't want to give up his food that he eats. My boys are not, but they are more leaning towards it than Julian, for example. But there's still cakes, there's still biscuits in the house, there's sugar, there's everything that you'd find in a normal household. And it just doesn't cross my mind to have it. Now, sometimes if they bring out a packet of biscuits in front of me, I sort of think, oh, I'd like one of those. And most times I won't, and occasionally I will, but I can have that 1 or 2 biscuits and then not have any more for months. So I can definitely moderate. Louise will make me talk about my Marks and Spencer's chocolate raisins, which I can't moderate on. And that's because they're little, and you sort of, once you start,
And you just
have
keep
to finish
shoveling them in, yeah.
Luckily, they're a small packet, and everyone else likes them as well, so I don't get to eat that many, but I could eat a whole packet of chocolate raisins.
So do you still have those in the house now and again, is that the one thing that you try to make sure you don't have in the house?
So we don't have it in our house, but I live next door to my mum, and she's always got chocolate raisins in her cupboard, and she is low carb as well. She's not keto, but she is low carb. But on a Sunday afternoon when we're playing cards, her partner will say, oh, get out the chocolate raisins. And out they come, and they sit there and they call me, Jackie, eat me, eat me, eat me. But I know that if I do have them, I won't be able to stop. The other week, I did wait until they nearly finished them all. And then I had a couple, and that's how I moderated them. But then there was one week where they were eating them, and I thought, oh, good, they're nearly gone. I don't have to worry anymore. And they said, oh, let's get out another packet. So I had to do 2 lots of telling myself, I'm not going to eat them. I'm not going to eat them. I'm not going to eat them.
I'm amazed at, well, I kind of feel like that I would be the same, but I've never tested myself like that. We just don't have anything. We just don't have anything. So there's never, you were going to say something?
But you're an abstainer then. So I think that really you're not moderating, you're abstaining. So I think, in a sense, you've by not having it in the house, you have avoided the temptation, of the challenge of being a moderator by saying, well, I'm not having it in the house, so I'm abstaining from that. So,
but I do feel like when I go out and stuff, that it doesn't call to me, And one of the things is like that smell of bread that used to be so amazing. I know when I see fat on meat or something, I used to have to cut every little bit off it. It literally made my hair stand up in the back of my neck, just to see or think about fat. I was that phobic about eating fat. And we went to a farmer's market that we used to go to regularly. And once we started this, within a couple of years, I remember walking past this store where they used to literally on the street cook this bread, and it would smell fabulous. And now I'm walking past it and thinking, oh my God, that smells terrible. It's just how your brain gets wired, and everybody's so different. But I feel like I literally recoil against most of that stuff now. So I've programmed my brain maybe to abstain from that stuff, but my brain is so programmed now that I don't struggle to. Everybody else is scarfing down all of this stuff in front of me. It's like, I'm not interested. You guys don't kill yourself. That's fine. I'm not interested. I
was going to say, so I'm the moderator, but Louise is an abstainer. She cannot start with anything like that. So I could have a bagel, I could have a slice of bread, I could have a biscuit or 2, and then that's it. I'm done.
Yeah, that's amazing. Fasting. You guys have, you've had some experience with fasting and some opinions, not opinions, but differing results from fasting. So maybe let's start with Louise and tell us about your thoughts on fasting.
Yeah, so it was really interesting because with the Fabulously Keto, like the Facebook group that we have, and we sort of created a bit of a fasting circle. So just a bit of a support group. And we got into quite a set routine for part of last year. And we were doing 2 lots of extended fasts. And that sort of ended up being from Sunday after supper to about Tuesday, and then we were doing another fast on the Wednesday to the Friday. So we were doing quite over 48 hours, I think, like
40 hours.
40 hours. And where we were doing that twice a week, and that seemed to, was really great to have that sort of community, that support. We were encouraging everybody, how's everybody going, and just having that sort of sense of we're in this together. And it was really interesting where Jackie actually had some great results. I'll let Jackie talk about her results, and it sort of, it was a bit meh. I could do it, it was fine. But the good thing is, with my partner, husband, Andrew, we were doing it together. So we got into this routine. It was really good. I had this moral support here at home, but I didn't see any results. Like, it was. I don't weigh myself, but my clothes were still fitting the same, and I didn't really do that. That was until at the start of at the end of April, I think we started a 100-day alternate day challenge, fasting challenge. So every other day we would have a up day of eating and a down day of fasting. So, and we were doing that cycling through the week. I was going all the way through the week, and Jackie was doing the set 3 days of alternate days. And for me, I had some good results. Really, my clothes are looser. I was having so much better blood glucose control, where I'd seen it sort of creeping up over the last 3 years. I'm back in that sort of threshold. It's super easy. I'm fasting today, and it's really great because tomorrow I get to eat. I get to have that party in my mouth, and I'm really looking forward to food. And I'm actually really a lot more productive, but don't tell anybody. Like, I actually work late, because, I've got no supper to have to cook, or no dishes to do, or nothing to plan. So I'm really excited, and I'll let Jackie tell her story about alternate day fasting, but this is a great pattern. This is really working for me, and it's really super interesting to see how, not that, we're kindred keto spirited women, but we're still individuals. We still have this individual response. So what worked for me didn't quite, I'll let Jackie tell the story, didn't work for her, but her pattern worked for her, but it didn't work for me.
Okay, Jackie?
Yeah, so when we were doing the 2 days a week, that was last April to July 2020, my weight was coming down. I don't lose the weight, I'm reducing it. Reduced about half a stone, which is 7 pounds. And then we stopped, and that was a problem because then we stopped doing that and the weight started to creep back up again. So by the time we came around to doing this 100-day challenge, I'd actually preceded it with a 6-day fast. And then I ate for a week, and then we'd started the 100-day challenge. It was very interesting because I've had very different results from Louise. So I was fasting Monday, Thursday and Saturday. So I did 3 days a week rather than the exact alternate day fasting. And I didn't lose, I reduced 2 pounds over 2 months. I didn't feel any benefit. My blood glucose stayed the same. So there was no real benefit. And after about 9 weeks, I just stopped. So it was about 2/3 way through, I just stopped. And then for the last 3 weeks, I have been eating normally 7 days a week, which is usually for me is normally 16/8 or 17/7, something like that. And then just this week, I've gone back to 2 days. I'm going to try that again and see if there's any difference. And I think that it may be the same as last year, and it may not. And there's a great quote by Heracles that says, the man can step in the same river, but it's not the same river and it's not the same man. So it'll be interesting to see what the results are in a couple of months' time of doing 2 days.
Yeah, but I think what that highlights, though, is what's becoming more and more apparent in this community to people that are looking at it properly, is that everybody is different. Like, there's no one size fits all, and that you have to look at what works for you in your lifestyle, with your physiology, with everything. That everybody's different. So a lot of the time we talk about, in this community, we talk about the fact that it's not about weight, that it's about metabolic health, and that's the primary object of going keto for a lot of people. And the weight is like the normalizing of the weight is like it's a great side effect, but it's not the main reason for it. But I'd be interested to hear if what your blood panels and that, I'm assuming you have had some done, is what sort of improvements have you seen in the markers, in your lipids and your inflammation markers and stuff like that? Then maybe start with Louise.
Yeah, so interestingly, I think, I came to keto obviously to manage a chronic pain condition. So certainly my CRP levels are good, like they're quite quite low. And the other tell for me is I don't take any sort of analgesia. So I don't take any paracetamols or ibuprofens or anything. I've actually been off all pain medication now for, I think, maybe a good 3 years, maybe. So, the therapeutic, restriction of carbohydrates is certainly managing my inflammation markers. I'm what you call probably insulin sensitive. So I'm not, by any means, there's any insulin resistance, despite being a former morbidly obese woman who has reduced her weight. So my blood panels are quite good in terms of, certainly my fasting insulin is down, and certainly all those other markers. We won't talk about cholesterol, but certainly my ratios are good, so that's all that matters. And I've crunched the numbers through the Feldman cholesterol code report, so I know that my ratios. I actually haven't had a coronary artery scan, but that's not really something that I can do. My DEXA, certainly my DEXA scans in terms of my body fat percentages is about 24%. So I'm 5'9" ish, 10ish, 5'10" and so I'm a tall woman, and I'm relatively lean, but I'm trying to preserve certainly my lean body mass as I'm getting into my golden years now. So.
Does that DEXA scan it gives you visceral fat as well? What is that?
Correct.
Really good as well.
So, and the reason I had that was because we have like an impedance scale, and the impedance scales, like the Fitbit scales, the ARIA scales, were consistently telling me I was 36% body fat, and I was weightlifting because I wanted to. Obviously, part of my rehabilitation was to ensure that I didn't lose any significant muscle mass with my injuries, and I was just working out like a mad woman, and I couldn't understand why that was erroneously some kind of error. And we took these DEXA scans, and it certainly showed that I was only 24% body fat. So I'll take that over 36% any day. So
yeah. How about you, Jackie?
So actually, I have nothing to compare it to because I'd never had any blood tests prior to 2018. And by 2018, I'd already been keto for a year and low carb for a year and a half. But that said, I think my markers are pretty good. My HDL is high. My trigs are low. Now, I have high LDL. My cholesterol is a bit higher, my LDL is a bit high. And so when I get the results back, I always get a call from the doctor saying, from the nurse or the receptionist saying, you need to see a doctor. And I say, okay. And then I go to see him, and he doesn't take any notice, basically. He doesn't say anything. That said, the last time I was at the doctor, we were going through it, and he said he's not concerned, but there was another doctor with him, and he said, I've just done your Q risk, and your Q risk is 2.4%, which means you have a 2.4% of having a heart attack or a stroke in the next 10 years. But after that, I did have a coronary artery scan, and I came back 0. So that's great.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't had a DEXA scan yet, but it is on my list of things to do, to contact the doctor. It's just so hard to get to a doctor at the moment to say, can I have this done? So that would be interesting. I've tested, so I am slightly insulin resistant, because the last time I checked my fasting insulin was November, and that was 5.9. So it's not bad. It's still in single digits, but probably a little bit high. And my HOMA-IR was 1.4, which is borderline insulin resistance. But I think it's on the way down. I don't think it's going up. I think it's on the way down. Who knows what it was before? So that's interesting.
And a lot of people, and so I'm surprised that the doctors didn't try and put you on statins because your LDL was high, but because that's normally the response from them, right? But also looking just at fasting insulin or as a marker of insulin resistance is not necessarily, we've gone back to like the same thing, like everybody's not the same. And so, and I don't think that's a good predictor for everybody about whether or not you really are insulin resistant. I think there's a lot more testing and stuff that can be done. The Kraft test is one of them that gives you a better indication of what of whether or not you really are insulin resistant. But at the same time, it should improve over time if you pretty decently strict about being on this diet. But if you're on the diet of living this lifestyle, everything starts to come right. And so what the actual numbers are, it's not worth stressing about, because all that stress is going to do is add more problems into the equation that you wouldn't have had if you weren't stressing about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. It's been fascinating. I'm interested to just hear if either of you have something else you wanted to talk about or bring up, or that we haven't covered here. Maybe start with Louise.
Yeah, so just being an Australian who was living and working in the UK, that's how Jackie and I met. And I'm since now living in Bangkok, Thailand. So I'm doubly challenged with all the delicious rice and noodle dishes here. And yeah, it adds an interesting chapter to my keto journey, because obviously going from Australia and then to the UK, so it was similar. The food was quite similar, but now, yeah, I'm just finding it a real challenge in terms of trying to stay low carb keto for, trying to do my best, where I'm having to cook a lot, and Western ingredients is always a challenge, finding the Western supermarkets at a premium, but still sort of saying, well, I can still keto while being here, and finding ways that I can maybe take a curry, or what are those delicious pork flavors that I can use, and there's some lovely green vegetables for stir fries, but without trying to use the sauces which are very hidden sugars and that sort of thing. And the food is so cheap here and delicious, but it's cooked in crappy seed oils, which is not good for someone that has a chronic pain condition. Exactly, because I find, if I'm eating street food too much, then I get a bit sort of, oh, that's a bit achy, knowing that that's cooked in the seed oil. So that's this is my next journey as we're here in Bangkok.
Yeah, you were mentioning that there are a lot of really cheap protein sources available, but not necessarily the ones, especially as an Australian, that you're used to with the lamb and and beef and stuff. So
Stop it, you're gonna make me cry. So yeah, and it's interesting because certainly, yeah, I love a good lamb loin chop, with the nice little fatty cutlets. So it's so delicious, and that sort of thing. That's typically frozen and imported, say, from New Zealand or Australia. There are butchers here, but of course that do raise like grass-fed beef. But again, you're paying a premium for something that isn't necessarily part of their normal cuisine, where it's chicken, pork, fish, duck, and other sort of crisp, critters, there's insects, frogs, that sort of thing. So duck, geese, yeah. It's just interesting.
Duck's interesting. It's one of the things that here in the States that we don't get, you don't see it. You won't walk past in a grocery store and see duck on, in the meat department where the chickens are. There is nothing. If you want to eat duck, you literally have to source it, get it delivered to your door or something, or go to some ethnic market somewhere. Because it's just not readily available here. And it's actually, compared to chicken, it's so much better because it has so much more fat in the meat in that. So for our way of life and our diet, it's actually more desirable than chicken.
Well, it's one of those delicious street foods that you see them hanging up, and they actually have this big slab of like crispy pork hanging on the butcher's hooks in the market stalls and that sort of stuff. So it is embracing local flavors, and that's not to say that the curries are absolutely delicious, and but sometimes you just hanker for for Vegemite.
Pork, lamb chop.
Mm.
Yeah. Jackie, did we miss anything with you?
No, I don't think so. I think I was just going to say that, Louise and I, we've come together, we're great friends, but we're so different because she loves cooking. She's always in the kitchen. At the weekend, you always find her in the kitchen, cooking things and baking things. And I avoid the kitchen as much as possible. So my husband, Julian, does all the cooking, not all of it. I've recently started trying out a few things. But if I want something keto specifically, like some rolls, or last weekend I made some ice cream, then I will do that. But on the day-to-day basis, I do as little cooking as possible. But Julian is really great because he will do whatever I say. So if I say no potatoes anymore, just 2 veg, then from then on I got meat and 2 veg, no potatoes. If I then say, I'm only eating meat at the moment, that's fine, I just get some meat. And so he will comply with everyone. So this week I'm not eating on Monday and Thursday, so he doesn't cook for me on Monday and Thursday. So he's really good and supported me in whatever I want to do, even though he doesn't follow it, and for the most part the boys don't either.
Yeah, it's just sad to hear that he does suffer with diabetes and stuff, and we all know that how much that could be improved if he did choose to eat this way. I have parents who now live in Australia, actually in Perth, who could do with this so badly, and yet they're just not interested, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
That's anyway. Fabulously Keto. That is the two of you, right? So maybe let's finish off by talking about that. How people can find your podcast, because you had some really high-profile people on there, and you've got a good dynamic going and everything. So I think people should listen to a bunch of your episodes. So if you could tell people how about that and how to find you, that would be cool.
Yeah. So shall I do that, Louise?
Jackie's the brains behind the outfit. I'm just the comic relief.
She's the larrikin.
I'm the larrikin.
So Fabulously Keto. Well, there's two aspects of it. So together we do the podcast, and then I do low carb and keto coaching under the same brand. And so Fabulously Keto is a podcast that is on all the podcast apps, whether it's Stitcher, Overcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you normally get your apps, we're there. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter we're on. So Twitter is Fabulously Keto. Facebook is Fabulously Keto, and there's a group called Fabulously Keto. And the only one we haven't managed to grab hold of as Fabulously Keto is Instagram, so we're Fabulously Keto 1.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I encourage everybody to listen to that. I was just when you first invited me to be on your podcast, I hadn't listened to any of the episodes before, and I just wanted to hear your style and stuff like that. So I went and had a look, and you had just recently released one with Dr. Brian Lenz. So he's just down the road from us, a great friend of mine as well. So I thought, okay, I'll listen to that one. And you two guys were on, like, waiting for him to come on or something. Or as he came on, you were like,
I was fangirling.
Yeah. And I was kind of disappointed in that, because it's like we can't let that happen with Brian. It's like, it'll go to his head, right? So you should have cut that bit out so that he wasn't aware of it. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I made up my mind to be really super cool and not fangirl, but I just couldn't help it. It was just like, oh, my hero, he's here.
Yeah, but you know what? When I started doing all these conferences and stuff, and so have got to know so many of these high-profile people, and what's so amazing about them is that they're just people. They're just regular people. There's one or two exceptions, but almost without exception, there's no ego. There's no self-opinionated issues. They're just fabulous people, and I think that's something about this whole community. It's Pam often says there's something about eating cream or drinking cream and eating fatty meat and stuff that just makes people happy, and so there's less drama in our community, and
definitely
I really enjoy being a part of it and meeting people like you. That's like that's part of the upside of being involved with this. So thank you for inviting me in the first place, which resulted in this happening as a reciprocal thing. It's been fascinating. I loved having you on, and hopefully we get to do a bunch more together, and maybe even you can make it out to one of our events sometime. Maybe come out to Boca in January or something like that. That would be cool.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Very much looking forward to being able to travel. And yeah, that's been a real pleasure, Doug. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to an episode of the LowCarbUSA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/LowCarbUSA.